Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to a special pre-season episode of season 13 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalog, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Today's episode is a fantastic chat that I had with my friend Eric Senich, who has been on the show previously back in October of last year. Now, as well as being an outstanding podcaster and rock historian, Eric also spent a large part of his early career as a DJ. So I thought it would be interesting to talk to him about the nature of the industry and how and why freeform DJs like Jim Ladd were such an important part of the culture and the development of rock and roll music. We wander off into some really interesting areas in this chat, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Eric Senich. Tom Petty. Tom Petty Project. Tom Petty. Hey, Tom Petty Project. Thanks for coming back on, man. This is going to be a hoot. Let's just refresh people's memories, though. When I sort of decided that I thought the way to kick off season 13, talking about the last DJ, is to get someone on to talk about radio. Because obviously there's a through line with, quite a few of the songs on this record, looking at the music industry and the sort of less savory aspects of it. So what's your background with radio, Eric?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me on, Kevin. This is an honor to be on the show again. This is so cool to talk about one of my favorite artists, but to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is radio. So background is that my dad was in radio for a long time. He got into radio through his cousin, Bob Crane, Colonel Hogan from Hogan's Heroes. So my dad was inspired by Bob and also Red Shandy's, I think Red Barber was the announcer for the Cardinals that he used to listen to games as a kid. Then I was listening to my dad. He'd be on the radio every weekend. I'd listen to him, and then I'd hang out at the radio station with him, and it just got in my blood. Yeah. And so when I went to college, I joined the college radio station. That would have been around 91, 92. And from there, I never looked back. And it really was from the time I was 16, right up until I got my first official gig. My dream was to be a rock and roll disc jockey. That was it. There was nothing else. I had no other. I wanted to be a sports writer, but then at some point, I was a sports editor for a while. I was in the business. I got a journalism degree, but I really just decided I really wanted to go all in radio. And so I did that in the mid to late 90s. I left the newspaper business and I worked anywhere and everywhere in the business here in Connecticut, here in the US. And I did that for a while. And then in 1999, I got hired my first full-time gig around 99, 2000s at a station in Fairfield County, right on the borderline of New York, called I-95. It's 50,000 watt station, really well-known heritage station. I mean, it was the greatest thing for me to finally get a full-time gig. But I'll tell you, before that is when I was part-time on WCCC, which is where Howard Stern worked for a time there in the late 70s. So that was my first paying gig after interning at stations and working here and there and just doing whatever I could. I got my first paying gig for $5 an hour, $5 an hour in 1996. And I was Fletch. My on-air name was Fletch.
Right.
I kid you not. Because the program director was asking me, what they trying to come up with a name for me the day before I went on the air, by the way. I'm like, huh? Like, why can't I just go with Eric Senich? No. Yeah. So he's like, what are your favorite TV shows? What are your favorite bands? What are your favorite movies? And I was listing the movies and came up with Fletch. He goes, that's it. So I was Fletch.
Very cool.
Yeah, that was 1996. That's when I, by the way, got to play Me Wise Magic from Van Halen. It was the fall of 96. So that was another thrill for me. It was like, holy shit, I'm playing brand new Van Halen with Dave.
Right.
That was really cool. So yeah, that's basically, then I worked in radio for a while. I worked I got the gig in Fairfield County at I-95, and I did that up until 2006. The money wasn't great, so I decided to get a 9 to 5 gig. I did that for a while, went back to I-95 part-time weekends from probably 2009 or 10 up through 2019. And by that time, the business had changed quite a bit. Radio had changed quite a bit, as we'll get into. And I felt there was time when I discovered podcasts. I thought that was the direction I wanted to go in, and that's when I launched my first podcast, which was called Discovery. And then a few years later, did Booked on Rock, and that's where we're at today. And journalism is still part of my life because, as you know, I wrote for the Van Halen News Desk, still a contributing writer. Just haven't had everything. It's just so busy. I haven't been able to write any articles for them for a while now. But I can't thank Jeff Hausman enough for bringing me on to that website. So I'm still writing. I still write. I still enjoy writing.
Well, let's
That's
talk
where
about
we're
that,
at, man.
Let's talk about that then. So, just like you said, college radio, and then working for getting a full-time gig. Is that FM or AM?
Yeah, FM. It was. I only did some fill-in AM work at the station my dad worked at in Connecticut. I would fill in when he was on vacation doing news, but it was all FM for me.
Okay, so what's the difference?
At station. Well, yeah, that's what we want to get into. Well, the difference between AM and FM is interesting, because with AM, it's interesting because AM has actually a stronger signal than FM. So AM waves basically they go out horizontally. FM waves go kind of up like a cone, and there's a stronger, wider signal with AM. But I did some research for this episode, Kevin, because to get into some of the technical aspects of it, I think it's interesting. I think it's important to mention this, and I want to find. Let's see, where is the the difference between FM and so. This is some stuff I actually learned by doing some of the homework for the show too. FM radio was invented in 1933, which is a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah,
but it was an improvement over AM radio. It offered greater fidelity, better sound, FM, and reduced static. AM signals generally had a longer range, but more susceptible to interference and static, resulting in lower sound quality. So FM signals, shorter range, but better sound quality. So when you had music stations, it was ideal to have that. But here's the crazy thing, Kevin, is that AM stations, they were playing music for a long time. And it was, interestingly enough, they and the listeners really didn't think there was any benefit to going over to FM for some reason. They were just so used to AM, I think.
Yeah.
And you think about that, you're like, well, wait a minute, it's in stereo. But a lot of those, like the Beatles and all those recordings, were in mono.
Yeah.
Because they were going to go on AM. The first FM station was way back in 1940, but it wasn't until the 60s and 70s that FM radio started to really take hold. Because what happened was that the FCC put restrictions on companies that owned stations. So they put restrictions on, they said, basically, you can't run the same thing on both AM and FM. You've got to put something on the FM station, particularly like when their signals would overlap. This would correct that issue. So in the late 60s, it was kind of like, what are we going to do with these stations? They didn't really do anything with it. And there's a guy by the name of Tom Donahue, who's so important to the history of FM rock radio. Tom Donahue, Big Daddy was his nickname on the air. Big, deep voice. You can find some of his clips on YouTube. In San Francisco, he launched the first FM, freeform rock station, because he was starting to notice, he was in the business of promotion. He had various roles in music. He was starting to notice that bands like Grateful Dead and Pink Floyd, bands that were getting a reaction from the younger audience, that were enjoying the fact that these were long form songs, jams, and not your ordinary 3-minute pop song. So he decided to launch this station. It was the first freeform FM rock radio, KMPX, I believe it was KMPX in San Francisco. And that was a huge moment in FM rock radio history, in music history too, because it now changed the approach in which not only bands but record labels were looking at the way they were going to record and release music. If we're going to get some exposure on these stations, let's make a Dark Side of the Moon. They're going to play the whole thing. There's more incentive to do something like that. So that was out of say. And by the way, Howard Hessman was one of the DJs, aka Johnny Fever from WKRP in Cincinnati. He was on that station. Another guy that was on there was Carl Gottlieb, who famously known as a guy who wrote, the scriptwriter for Jaws. He was one of the writers of Jaws.
Yeah.
And he's in the film too. He's got the small role. He plays the local newspaper guy. Right. But all of these guys were crazy personalities who played whatever they wanted. So you'd have a guy in the morning that was playing nothing but jazz, and then the next guy comes in, just let's say it's Howard Hessman. He's going to start playing some of this trippy shit from Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, you name it. But then the next guy gets on and just start playing some country. Next guy comes on, he's going to do some soul, R&B, funk. It was all over the map, whatever you want to do. But also the personalities on the radio were they had a voice, and we're talking about counterculture movement. So these were people that beat poets and people that were controversial, maybe had things that these commercial stations wanted nothing to do with.
Right.
Nothing to do with at all, because this was way too far from the mainstream. So it was dangerous, and it was groundbreaking, and it was about community. It was very much like a Grateful Dead type of situation, where like with the Grateful Dead, the audience is every bit part of the show, as is the band on stage. The audience was part of it. There's clips of the Altamont concert, where the all that terrible stuff went down when the Stones were on stage, and there was, guy gets stabbed and killed, this and the other. The very next morning, they've got people that were there. They got people from the biker gang that was there for security. All of a sudden I'm drawing blank on the name of it. But anyway, all these people were calling in, giving their experiences and talking about what happened that night. It was just a magical thing. But yeah, the start FM was like a sound related thing, but then it became much more than that.
But you think, because that sort of, it does coincide
Hell's Angels,
with,
by the way. Hell's Angels.
Okay.
That was, yeah.
But see, it does coincide though with the explosion of rock and roll, right? And you think that maybe if FM radio doesn't come in and doesn't have those personalities that are willing to take those leaps of faith with bands that are not necessarily in the mainstream and not doing those 3-minute pop songs, maybe we don't get heavy metal, and maybe we don't get some of these more progressive rock acts getting into people's ears, because really you would then just have to be part of that scene, and you just wouldn't hear about it otherwise, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why bands like Yes and King Crimson or whatever, all these bands that tried all these experimental things, avant-garde things, they were welcome in these stations.
Yeah.
Give us that stuff. Frank Zappa was another example. I mean, those were the stations that was their home. That was where they could share their art with this growing audience, that again, just wasn't, they were just sick and tired of the whole plastic world. Everything is just homogenized.
Yeah.
And, you look how it influenced the Beatles. Dylan influenced the Beatles, of course, but also these bands, these experimental bands that were starting to make this music that was, again, far from the norm. That was, I'm sure, a huge inspiration to the Beatles. So
yeah,
Jimi Hendrix, would we even have Jimi Hendrix? He wouldn't have gotten it. They didn't know what to do with him. Promoters, they had him open for the Monkees.
Right.
They didn't know what to do with him. Right. Yes, it's insane. It is insane. So radio has had a huge impact, and now as we stand here today in 2025, it's a very different world. So now streaming services are what impacts what you're going to hear, and we have gone back to the beginning in a way where we're back to, it used to be 45 singles was it, and then
Yeah.
when FM rock radio came, it was album oriented formats. Well, now we're back to the singles again. Really, I mean, artists are releasing albums, but it's like,
Yeah.
hey, Taylor Swift dropped a new single today. It's yeah, there's albums, but it's the singles that really you want. And we'll get to this a little bit more later, but you want to, the record labels and these artists want to make a song that's going to cause a buzz on Spotify and get on one of these curated playlists, quote unquote. Yeah. But they're not curated by people as much as they are algorithms. And once you get on a playlist and you got some of your buddies, say teenagers in their 20s, they're having a party and they just want to pick a playlist of the coolest shit that's out there right now. Well, it's going to be one of those songs, hopefully, that you have recorded or your artist for a label has put out there. It's a whole different way of promoting the music now.
Well, let's rewind there because, right at the start of that, you were talking there and you mentioned the term freeform radio. And of course, it definitely isn't the way it is nowadays. And it sort of wasn't the way it was until FM came along. So what does that mean? As a DJ, like working at a station, how's a station configured? Like, what's a program director? What does that mean? And how much say does a DJ actually have in what they play?
Yeah, DJs, I hate to break this to people if they are still listening to radio and they think that it is all just, spur of the moment and DJs play whatever they want. The radio stations are commercial stations, and we can really kind of focus on classic rock stations too, because that's kind of the genre we're talking about.
Yeah.
It is, everything you hear is already planned out days in advance, with the exception of maybe a song or two during the request hour at noon. I have the air quotes, okay, because you have a full hour of requests, but we would only play 2. Because the program director would leave us 2 slots open, 3, maybe 4. Maybe the afternoon drive, you get to play a song that that somebody requests. A specialty show like I had a Led Zeppelin show every weeknight at 8:00, 3 Zeppelin songs. Now I had the first and third already chosen by the program director, already in the playlist, already printed out in front of me on the computer screen, but the middle one I could have fun with. That's where I had some fun. That's where I would play, but that was rare. Other than that, everything you hear is carefully planned out, spread out, depending on, you want to balance it out between the pacing of a song. It depends on the format, but let's say your average classic rock station, you don't want to have too many songs from the 70s in a row. So we got to have one from the 60s, one from the 70s. Now we'll do one from the 80s, and they have something called day part, which is another interesting thing. A day part is something where there's songs like the station I worked at. There were songs like, say, Black Sabbath, I don't know, like what would be the heaviest Sabbath song you can think of?
Supernaut, maybe, or
right. But even that, it was so rare, we probably wouldn't play that. But I'll give you an actual incident that happened to me. I got in trouble with my program director. I was filling in for the midday woman. My shift was 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then when somebody was on vacation, I would go on, I'd fill in. And during the lunch hour, somebody requested Ted Nugent's Stranglehold. Honest to God, people are going to be, you probably won't even believe me when I tell you this. And I played Stranglehold, and I walked by my program director's office, just coming back from getting something from the kitchen or whatever. And he's like, "Hey man, watch the day parts." And I was like, "What is a day part?" I didn't know.
Right.
And a day part is, you want to part out all the songs that are too heavy for our target audience. Those have to be played at night, because we've got people in dentist office and doctor's office that have our station on, and it might be too offensive to, I don't know,
Right.
the 60 to 70-year-olds who are getting their tooth drilled at the dentist. I don't know, whatever. But that's the point. So I got in trouble for that. That's what a day part is. You're parting out certain things. This you played during the day, this you never played during the day.
Right.
And there's a lot of research that goes into it. There's audience testing. There's basically call out, kind of just calling random phone numbers in the area. But I don't think we were doing that at the time. This is in like the 2000s, early 2000s, where you would have people that you would select a group of people in your target audience. So when we're talking classic rock, we're talking 18 to 35. Maybe now it's older. I mean, maybe 28 to 45, maybe 30 to 60. I mean, I know with my podcast, the Book Down Rock podcast, the most people that listen are between the ages of 40 and 65, right?
Right.
But classic rock, let's just say 18 to 35s. And so you are going to now play little snippets of songs. So all these people get together at this event, and you're going to play like a little snippet of a song, like maybe 3 seconds, 5 seconds. And they want to know if you're into it at the start of the song. Do you want to keep listening? Okay. It's not really accurate. It's not the best way to do it, but that's basically what they've been doing. Radio stations have been doing, like listening events, online surveys. Again, you're looking for your demographic. So it helps to identify the songs that maybe resonate most with their audience. So that's how they build that. And then they have a group of consultants that come in. So you ask about program directors and how much power they have or say. Not much. It's maybe in some markets, maybe a little more than others. But what we had is the program director would be basically the corporate would tell them, this is your consultant. This is what they think you should do. This is what you're going to do. You may have some say in it, but at the end of the day, this is what it is. We had at one point, there was the company that owned our station at one time also owned the light top 40 station across the way. And they had a consultant that worked at that station who really didn't know shit about rock and roll.
Right.
So he would choose songs that just didn't fit. And I remember he wanted us to play Genesis. And my God, Genesis, I love. And there's so many great Genesis songs that you could play on a rock station, but it was the one from Invisible Touch, which was the soft song. And I'm going to find it here. No. It was In Too Deep.
Okay.
No. Right, is that, that might be the one. It was the ballad. Yeah. And it just didn't work with it. Stuck out like a sore thumb in between Zeppelin's Whole Lot of Love and Ain't Talking About Love. You know what I mean? Like it just, and everybody was like, why did we play in this? But this guy thought it was perfect because it was going to bring in some, maybe more of the females, or, all these approaches that they have to it. And I think that's, I haven't worked in commercial radio for about 5 years now. So, but things haven't changed all that much, sadly.
Right. So if we wind that back up, then you're talking about sort of the program director tells the DJ, gives the DJ essentially a set list of what they're going to play with a few spots here and there. The program director is being told, this is what we think you should be pushing now. Who's doing that then? Who's the taste maker who's saying, this is what whoever we is, we want on the radio? So where's that coming from?
Well, that's corporate. Again, that's the consultants. And those are the things that they all get together and discuss as to, again, who's our target audience. But that's up top. That's the corporate.
Right.
Okay. So they have, and now you have corporations that own stations all over the country.
Yeah. So it's the same thing, right?
That was the thing.
The same programming.
Correct. So but prior to the mid 90s, very different. There was the program directors would get together, consultants would be part of it, but they could make the call. They could make the decisions a lot more. But Bill Clinton, President Clinton had allowed corporations to buy out endless amounts of radio stations, endless amounts of newspapers.
Yeah.
And that, my opinion, was the beginning of the downfall of radio, with the final blow being streaming services. Sirius XM, I remember there was some anxiety over that, some concern, but the first blow was that, because you had, for example, now here where I live in Connecticut, there's Hartford, there's New Haven, there's Fairfield County, there's the eastern part of the state that had stations there, and they all had their own individual language to it. They would play certain bands that the other station wouldn't play. Like WCCC was like the badass kind of, that troubled kid who would, just listen to Metallica and fucking Slayer, and was just like, he'd punch you in the face if you insulted his favorite band. That was CCC. Had an attitude to it, and it was great. Then you had a station like WHCN in Hartford, and they would play certain things maybe that WPLR New Haven wouldn't play. Like they might play a little more of like you might hear more of Steely Dan on HCN, whereas PLR would be there. I discovered Blues Traveler through WPLR, and I wasn't working there at the time, but my assumption would be that, hey, this is a band I think, this is good for our New Haven area crowd. They would love this. Like a jam band, very cool. Spin Doctor, same thing. Little Miss Can't Be Wrong. They were playing. And then it would be years later that all of a sudden Blues Traveler was like a huge success. I'm like, shit, man, I remember them playing But Anyway in 1991. Other stations didn't play it. And that was so cool. But that came to an end when the bigger corporations took over. So now you could take a cross-country road trip in your vehicle and you listen to a station. Like, boy, I like what these guys are playing. What's the name of them? Oh, it's the River 105.9 FM. Cool. And you're just driving. And now you're in a whole other, you've just left Connecticut and now you're somewhere in like fucking Pennsylvania, and there's a River 98.6, and it's the same exact playlist, same song, same vibe, same imaging. Now, imaging was also cool too, because imaging is where you maybe take like in between songs, you take you take just a funny clip from the Three Stooges and you put that in there, and you know, and I don't know, it's whatever. It's just in between songs, but it had a certain vibe too. So the imaging had an attitude. Like CCC had imaging that was just like in your face. PLR would have some kind of imaging that was a little more like, hey, dude, what's up, man?
Yeah,
just chilling, having, smoke a joint and let's play some Hendrix. They all had their different flavor and vibe to it, and that again changed with time. So, and as far as heritage artists releasing new music, there was a point there, I remember in the early 2000s, where that no longer, they were going to not even bother. It was like, well, why not? Springsteen's got a new album out. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Okay. I do, but all right. Like we played A Different Kind of Truth. Some of the songs off there from Van Halen, they just came and went.
Yeah.
Came and went. I was like, this is fucking Dave's back with Van Halen, but
it's big news in the Van Halen circles, right? Yeah.
But that's you and I, like music lovers, right? The average person is just like, huh? Like, just play John. It's like, okay. Can you play Panama? Yeah. All right.
Again?
Play that again. And it's all built around, and I sorry, Kevin, I could just go on here. You shut me up.
Please do.
but it's all based around average time of listening, which is minimized now shrunken down to like 20 minutes, like a commute from and to work or whatever. So if you're going to play, for example, you're going to play Lynyrd Skynyrd. Let's just say, Sweet Home Alabama is a given, but let's just say you're going to play like a Skynyrd song, That Smell. And you're playing that sometime between 8 a.m. and noon, 9 a.m. and noon. Well, the person who heard it then, they are assuming is not going to be listening between 1 and 3 p.m. They're at the job, they're not listening. So go ahead and play it again then.
Right.
And now you would have, like, I had a truck driver who I thought he was going to have a fucking nervous breakdown. Literally, he's calling me and he's like, "Stop playing the same song!" Like, because he was listening to it every day. He said, "My
Yeah.
radio's broke. I can't get any other station. All I get is your station. And I like what you guys are doing, but it's the same fucking shit every day." And he goes, "Why?" He goes, "You're playing Aerosmith's Living on the Edge. I heard that yesterday morning. Now you're playing it this afternoon."
Yeah.
Well, that was our way of saying we're mixing it up. We're playing Living on the Edge on Monday morning at 10, but then we won't play it until Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, it's funny
and all the playlists were on paper. You'd have it with the stop sets with the commercials in there. And so you would have 5-6 minutes of commercials twice an hour. So you'd have 50. The other thing is radio stations will lie to you. 50 minutes of rock every hour. Bullshit. Right? It was like 46 minutes, 47 minutes. They were, I did a speech in front of a college course and one of the kids called me out on that. It's like, "You say it's 15 minutes of rock every hour, but I counted it out." I counted it out.
Always
it was
one.
like 46. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And, it's like the Wizard of Oz. You pull the curtain back and there's it's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
That's, but still there was a magic to radio that I got an FM radio tattooed on my arm, man. It's always a part of my life, huge part of my life. Love it. I will love it to the end. That's where it's heartbreaking that I had to leave. Heartbreaking that I even have to tell you these things, that it's not what it was. How do you fix it? Hey, I have my theories. You probably have yours, but the
problem with that is
with streaming services.
You can't go backwards, right? You just simply can't do that. And it's the same.
No.
But I think the problem is, and this is where we'll get into this then, is, growing up, we all sort of had that shared experience of when you go to school, everyone's kind of heard the same songs, so you can talk about them. So you talk about the new, I don't know, the new Van Halen song. Yeah, did you hear that new song, that new Van Halen song? Or did you hear the new Scorpions? Or did you hear the new Tom Petty? Or whoever it is? Because it was sort of being curated for us, and we were sort of being given the same thing, but everyone was getting more or less the same experience. Now, of course, what that led to is, like you said, it becomes homogenized, because if everyone's listening to that and the people who are tracking those numbers that you were talking about say, well, that's doing quite well, play more of that. So then you get everything starts to get to sound kind of the same, and those fringe stuff, those outliers, that maybe that 6-7 minute song, a Bohemian Rhapsody or something, has much less chance of permeating that sort of that membrane, right? And so then we get into, we look at this idea of payola. So I wanted to talk about this just to sort of, again, if we're talking about pulling the curtain back here, we always think that, well, artists write good songs and they get on the radio because they're good songs and DJs want to play good songs. But of course, it ain't so, right? And so in the 50s and 60s, the record labels found out or figured out that, well, all we've got to do is go to the station and incentivize them. And we'll use that nice soft word. We'll incentivize them to play this artist that we want to push. Right, so they gift in, they'll gift holidays, or they'll just straight up cash, or whatever it might be, and of course, then people got
or a little nose candy,
or a little nose candy, or a lot of nose candy. Right?
I mean, no joke. I mean, that was what it was. It was like, hey man, here you go, got a little present in there for you,
a little bump.
Yeah. Right.
So those guys like Alan Freed, right, was one of the, when there was the FCC started looking into all this, or Congress started looking into these a national sort of expose on payola, and Alan Freed, who famously coined the term rock and roll, and died of symptoms brought on by alcoholism at 43 because he lost his whole career over this, because he was taking money from the labels to pay whatever they said. So I was looking back into this as well, and I found it interesting that one of the sort of the triggers for this was a fight between the BMI and ASCAP. So the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers, that's a non-profit organization that looks after, publishing rights and all that kind of stuff. And BMI was sort of a bit more of a new kid on the block. Like, that was more the FM, and ASCAP was more like the AM, where BMI was backing all these rock and roll artists. ASCAP didn't like that, and that was that sort of older generation who are all these kids with their short hair and their loud music. I don't like it, right? So you get all that friction. So ASCAP tries to take BMI down, and one of the ways they do that is by sort of highlighting the fact that, well, they're all paying to get all this rock and roll on the radio, and we don't like this. So it's a really interesting sort of everything sort of all inbound together, right? We get all these things all confluencing together all at the same time to sort of create this explosion where rock and roll actually weirdly ends up benefiting from it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, rock and roll music, it wasn't a money-making well, FM freeform rock radio was not a money making business at first.
Right.
And I don't think they ever even thought about it. They just thought of it as an art form. It was an expression. It was a way to express yourself. And it was a tribal thing because it was something that, it's like, it's like you're one of us. We are you, you are us. This is this communal thing. But when they started to realize the audience was getting bigger and bigger, of course, the suits start to say, ooh, aha, looks like we got something here. And that's when it starts to become commercialized. But Alan Freed, it wasn't fair what happened to him. Pretty much every disc jockey was guilty of that. But you have to, if you're going to take down all of them, you got to go to the top. Who's at the top of the ladder? Alan Freed was the guy. He was the target. But it wasn't like he was the only guy doing it. You know, that's Dick Clark, the reality of the business at that time. Dick Clark,
American Bandstand. I mean, he divested all his interest in all those businesses to clear up that conflict of interest. But he was, like you said, I mean, that was the way you did business, right? It's like if you go to Mexico, you bribe the police because that's the way that it works down there. It's not that's culturally just the way it works. And so when you get this regulation coming in and being, I'm sure they thought back then, well, this is very heavy handed. I don't mind. Let's have some regulation, but you can't stop us doing it. But then it becomes almost this moral imperative that you can't pay to get your music on the radio. When really, if you are a fan of free market economics, and I'm one of those soft, squishy, more or less sort of lefty liberally types, but that is how it's supposed to work then, right? If you've got the money to be able to pay for the promotion, well, then that's the way it should work. But I think having an independent body like the FCC or, CRTC up in here in Canada, or Ofcom in the UK, that's a good thing that we've got these people who are saying, okay, but that's okay, but that then hurts smaller labels, smaller artists who don't have that money to get their stuff on the radio. Sure. So I think that for the art side of it, it's the right way to go.
It's no different than in sports. Look, the New York Yankees have more money than the rest of them. That's legal. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm the comparison is that if you have somebody or a group that has the money, the influence, they could make things happen. And that's what would happen. Now, the bigger labels have more money, more influence, right? We could also get into there was the mafia ties. And I mean, it literally mafia ties. You're going to play this song or you're going to wind up in the fucking river tomorrow. Right. Okay. I mean, and through Books on Rock, I've spoken with some people that, I spoke with somebody who was literally in one of the record label offices with one of their well-known artists who had a lot of hits, who didn't have any for a few years. And this quote unquote record label guy had this artist up against the wall, pinned him up against the wall. You get a fucking hit from me, man. Otherwise you understand what's going to happen. Oh yeah. No, I got you.
Yeah.
There was that shit going on too. But, the bottom line, though, is that could have a lot of influence. Of course, it's going to get your song played on the radio. But at the end of the day, it's the audience that's going to tell you whether they like it or not. So that's what gave it staying power. You could get a song on the radio, but is it going to be good? So let's not take anything away from these artists. They had the push behind them, but you had to have something good. The problem is you've got an artist on a tiny little label that doesn't stand a chance. And there's this amazing song that they've recorded that just comes and goes and we never know about it. Right. Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a great example of this was this is a classic story of the record business and the radio business and the complete roller coaster ride that it is. Going back to the Spin Doctors again, right? Just covered there was a book on the 90s jam band explosion, and they talking with the author about all these bands. And Spin Doctors was a band who had Pocket Full of Kryptonite out, released. Now they were signed to Epic Records, it's a big label, but they were on the bottom of the ladder. Nobody gave a shit there. They didn't care. They got this band Pearl Jam. We're going to push this band. Chris Barron, the singer, he would get pissed off. They'd be touring all over the country, playing all these colleges, campuses, and people going ape shit over these songs. I mean, they're listening to Prince's Little Miss Can't Be Wrong, and they're just like, this is great shit, man.
Yeah.
Jimmy Olsen's Blues, that Jimmy Olsen's Blues song, right?
Yeah.
So people are loving it. He's going to the record stores in each town, and they got these big billboards of Pearl Jam and the big right up in the front of the record store. And then he'd look for Spin Doctors, PQRS, one copy of the Spin Doctors album, and he was just like, what the fuck? After a year, the label says to them, okay, guys, let's get another album ready to do it all over again. And they're like, whoa, hold on, man. These songs are great. People are responding. You know what happened? This is a great story. So there's two things that happened. There was a station in Vermont that was playing Spin Doctors. In fact, they were playing a song called "Big Fat Funky Booty," and they would play it in a commercial, like a local commercial for some, I don't know, pick up your skis at Joe's ski shop, and you're hearing the Spin Doctors. People were calling in like, "What is that? Who is that?"
Right.
They started playing Spins. They started playing Little Miss Can't Be Wrong, Two Prince. The program director wrote to Epic Records and said, "You guys need to wake up. You have to give this band a chance." There's that. And there was a young woman that worked at Epic Records who was a huge Spins fan. She went to the guy who was ever in charge of really making these decisions, So they were all out one night having a drink, and all the people at the label just hanging out, having a good time, having a beer too. She says to this guy, she was bothering him, like, this guy's like, enough with the Spin Doctors. I get. She's like, let's just do this. If I can drink you under the table right now, let's have a game, shots, go back and forth. Whoever wins, okay, makes the final call. If I win, you agree to put money into the Spin Doctors. She says, yeah, fine, let's do it. Drank him under the table. Won. So they start now all of a sudden Spin Doctors are on Saturday Night Live. Oh, hey, let's call Rolling Stone. Hey, can you guys get these guys a little exposure? Can you write an article on them? They blow up.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the upside. Next album, Turn It Upside Down, comes out. Holy shit, Spin Doctors, they're going to be, they're the biggest thing ever. This is going to be another huge album. The first single kind of stiffs. It was called Cleopatra's Cat.
Yep. I remember.
So everybody gives up on them. They follow up with You Let Your Heart Go Too Fast. And it's like just outside of the top 40. But the album, and I'll tell you, is great. Okay. But the album just fades into nowhere. But it sells 2 million copies. That was a failure. That was a failure because they didn't sell 14 million copies like they did on the previous one. And so here's the cutthroat side of the music business. Guys, you're done. See you later. You're yesterday's news. Radio, Spin Doctors, yesterday's news. They got a new album out. Nobody gives a shit. They came out with an album 2 years later. Another great album. You Got to Believe in Something. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody. It sold about 50,000 copies.
Right.
So that's, kind of just going with what we're talking about, like the influence, like you can have a phenomenal song or a set of songs, but if you don't have the right things happening for you and you don't got the money behind you, you don't have that push, it's going to go nowhere. And radio had that impact. It broke bands. Bands blew up just from having a song on the radio. Blew up. We could talk about MTV. That was even times 100. But radio was huge, and radio was huge. It at one point it was the main source of entertainment. But then film comes along, and that was the thing. Movies are going to kill radio. It didn't. People still loved their radio, right? Television comes along. Oh boy, radio's good. It took a hit, right? But it was a dent. But still, radio is still huge. But once you get to the early 2000s and file sharing, game over.
Yeah.
Because now we don't need our local radio station to discover bands. We have YouTube, we have Spotify, and I hate to say it, I mean, you go
It's
to I go various chiropractor. I go to a chiropractor weekly. I have, every now and then go to the dentist, this and the other. I never hear an FM radio station coming over the speakers. Never. It's automated.
yeah,
It's a playlist curated. It's some company playlist. It's Spotify. That is a bummer. But that's
for
radio
sure.
stations were always on at your local business.
Of course, but I
Always.
mean, but that sort of push through of, like I say, curate. We're talking a lot about the word curation here is the right word, right? Because it's basically someone else shaping what this generation of radio listeners is going to listen
Mhm.
to.
Yeah.
And
We
I
tell
sort
you
of
what you're going to like.
well, and this is where I love that quote from Noel Gallagher. Now, I'm not a huge Oasis fan. I think the first record was a great rock and roll record, but after that, I'm a little cooler on that band. But Noel Gallagher said, he basically said that you don't listen to people. Don't let them tell you what they want. They don't know. We'll tell you what we're going to do, and you'll like it because it's great. And so you sort of lose that unless you get someone like a Jim Ladd, right? Who sort of sticks to his
Mhm.
guns and gets fired and gets rehired because he won't play ball and he won't play what they want to play and he won't say what they want him to say. So you do still have those sort of bastions of freeform expression who understand that the music is important. It was the same with, Mo Austin and Lenny Waronker at Warner Brothers to an extent, right? Where they were sort of a bit of an atypical label in that they trusted their artists. And they didn't tell them, well, no, you've got to have a song that sounds like this and a song that sounds like this, and you've got to put this on the album cover. They said, okay, well, we'll trust to a certain extent that you guys know what you're doing. So we sort of lose that. And then, as you're saying, as we then move into the streaming era, that just kind of explodes in it's times a million, right? Because then you get things like Spotify's discovery mode, right? And there's no regulation
Yes.
on the streaming space, so you can
Yes.
pay to get on the discovery mode. You can pay a lot of money for that if you've got a lot of money, which of course the major labels do, and independent artists don't. So yes, it's easier to distribute your music and publish it nowadays. Actually, much harder to get it heard.
Absolutely. I go with DJ mode on Spotify, and I got to tell you, I
Right.
love it. I mean, sometimes they're repeating the same thing here or there, and sometimes it'll fade out of the song too early or start into a song too late every now and then. But I got to tell you, I mean, it gives me stuff that they know I'd like,
Right.
and that's the majority of people. We're too busy to seek out music. We prefer it come to us. So who's going to give it to me? Is
Yeah.
it going if it's is it going to be my local radio station or do I have now I have Spotify? So okay, let them give it to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not proud of saying that. I mean, there's the alternative crowd out there. And there are people that were following Jane's Addiction long before they had a hit single. I had a friend of mine that just loved him. There was the underground movement. There were people that loved Nirvana before everybody loved Nirvana.
Yeah.
But the majority of the audience, who is the audience that you want to run advertisements to, so they could go out and buy their products.
Yep.
That's it. I mean, it's human behavior. It's the way, it's like repetition too. That's another fascinating thing. I had done an episode. A guy wrote a phenomenal book on, just something about repetition. We seek comfort in repetition. And then we like, there's a feeling of comfort in hearing a song or seeing a movie that we know, that we're
Yeah.
familiar with. And so you have to, but how do you get a song familiar to somebody if you're not going to give it a chance? So we go back to where, that's where you got to have a little influence. Hey guys, can you just put this in rotation like 2-3 times a day? Just give it a couple weeks and see what happens. Okay. And then people start
Yeah.
calling in. Hey, that song's awesome, man. That song kicks ass. A lot of the program directors would look at the trade magazines and see what songs are hot in other parts of the country. Now you do it
Right.
on the internet, but it's, there was a record label guy that I interviewed. This is maybe 3-4 months ago. And it just speaks to, because a lot of people in the business will try, they'll try to tell you, I know how to break a band. I know what you need to do. And this was Paul Rappaport for Columbia Records, right? And this guy was a VP. He was big time, right? I
Right.
said, what's the process that you go through when you're thinking of like, you got a roster of bands and you got to decide. You can't put all your money in every band on the roster. So you got to prioritize. Like, how do you know which one's going to be at the top of the list? And he's just like, man, we didn't know what the fuck we were. I mean, we would. We're
Just
just
guessing.
yeah. I think that's good. You know what I mean? Because how many times like Nirvana's Nevermind comes out and Rolling Stone review famously, shits all over it.
Yeah.
And then 20, 25, 30 years later, now it's in their list of the greatest albums of all time. And the review is like, what a brilliant album. And, that's basically what, Paul was saying. He's like, hey, we just, it's like rolling the dice, or you got a feeling about a band. Let's go with that. It's like, because you can't, you don't, nobody's that brilliant to where, I mean, otherwise you could just like, okay, I know how to win the lottery. I know exactly what the numbers are going to be. You don't.
Yeah.
So you just put it out there and see what happens. And you hope that, through radio airplay, it was going to gain some steam. And now that's with Spotify. And also, I mean, we can't forget YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube is algorithm based. So, if something takes off, people say, well, why bother making a video? Well, it's not going to get like MTV in the 80s exposure, but
it'll get you plays.
Still, yeah. I mean, it's still going to pop up on somebody's, phone or whatever while they're just messing around on YouTube, and you got suggestions, and there it is.
Yeah. But it is interesting though, right? Because like I said, and I'll go back to Jim Ladd, who, obviously we're sort of talking about the last DJ here, but you do have those people within the culture and within the industry who are tied into both, and they do have that finger on the pulse where they can say, I'm pretty sure these guys have got something. And it is different, and it is a little bit unique, but stick with it. And maybe it's not going to be this album, but stick with these guys. And so I think that when you've got those, but because people like Jim Ladd, and we were talking about, these other guys, these all famous DJs, they were trusted too, right? It wasn't just that they had the sort of the leeway to do what they were doing and pick their own, curate their own playlists, but they're also trusted by their listeners because they developed that relationship with their listeners to say, if you like this, you're probably going to like a lot of what I'm saying here, and some of it will be outside of what you like, but you cultivate that following. And so then really with those kinds of guys, the freeform guys, you very few of them, but really what you had to do is you had to make a great record. Because if you didn't make a great record, they just wouldn't play you because, well, that just isn't any good. So you weren't getting on the radio regardless that way, right?
So glad you brought that up, Kevin, because, as much as, I just shared that story about, these record label guys, just like, I don't know, I mean, they love music and they have a passion for it, but those guys, the Jim Ladds, they had that finger on the pulse of what was happening. They were talking to music fans every day, every night in the studio. People calling, hey man, you guys going to play that? You guys going to play that? Whatever, that Pink Floyd song, man.
Yeah.
Which one do you talk about? Oh, I wish you were here, man. That shit's fucking cool. All right, yeah. but and they are out at the shows, the local shows. They're out at the clubs. They're talking with people. They see these bands, these upcoming bands, and they may go to see a band with a couple hundred people there at CBGB's, but they're seeing the responses of these people in the audience, and they're like, holy shit, this band something's happening. We got to do something with them. And you're so right, Kevin. But those became dinosaurs. You know why?
Yep.
Because they cost too much to pay. So let's bring in disc jockeys that maybe they love rock and roll, maybe they don't. Doesn't matter. We're going to tell them what they're going to play. We're not going to give them any decisions. And the other part of it was you'd have DJs that would go rogue, and they'd play shit that just was way too out there for any commercial station to really collect a sizable audience for. Okay. So in defense of radio, there was that, but you had these guys, you started stripping people of the ability to know what they should be playing. They know what this audience wants to hear. Doesn't matter. Stick to the playlist. You got it in front of you. Read the cue cards. Okay. And I used to be told, can't talk more than 60 seconds during your longest break. This break, you can only talk 30. This break, you can only talk 10. It was all, like just hands tied, creatively frustrated. That's why I couldn't do it anymore. There was no creativity there. Jim Ladd is not only picking songs that he felt that people would love, he was putting together a piece of art. He would have a theme, and because he knew every goddamn song by every band that was out there, he wait a minute. Okay, so tonight's theme is trains. Shit, man, there's that song. What's the song off of Grateful Dead? Built to Last. Yeah. Brent Midland has a song on there.
Right.
Let's play that one. What about that song by Seeger? You know, put it all together, flows. Sometimes they're making a statement. Sometimes it was obvious as, you know, like a hand in front of your face, but sometimes it was subversive. It was brilliant shit. It was absolutely brilliant. I was listening to Jim Ladd on Sirius XM, you know, right up towards the end there, and he was a rarity, man. He was, and when he passed away, that was it. There went the last DJ.
Yeah.
You know, and Tom Petty was, and you know this more than me about Petty lore, but the song really, he was more talking about corporations taking over everything. And he used that as an example, and he kind of regretted a little bit, like, geez, you know, everybody was thought I was, you know, taking a dump on radio, but it was
and that's the thing, right? I mean,
a metaphor. It was a metaphor,
and that,
you know,
that's the important thing to talk about as I head into this season, is that Petty's looking at that as a fan of the form and a fan of the people like Jim Ladd, the freeform guys who did create art as well, because and that's where we end up with art as a commodity and not art for art's sake, right? Where the only value art has to the corporation is how much money it can make. And so, you know, like I said, we as the listening public, and we've already drawn, like you said, drawn back the curtain, are naive enough to think that there's a purity to art. And I'd say in the main, there is from the creative standpoint, but it's always necessarily compromised to some degree with most people for the sake of, you know, professional expediency, let's say, or straight up financial gain. And you think about the song Money Becomes King, when Petty's talking about, you know, that this artist who they all loved and they just all rallied round, and they got priced out of the tickets, so they're up in the nosebleeds. And he says, we arrived there early in time to see rehearsal, and John came out and lip synced his new light beer commercial. I mean, that to me is like that perfect summation of. I really remember Doug Stanhope doing that bit about. He's talking about, you know, when artists die young, and he was talking about Hendrix. He said, you know, we all assumed that Hendrix would have just kept putting out, you know, iconic album after iconic album after. Maybe he'd just have ended up playing with the Backstreet Boys at the Super Bowl. You know, so it's just that thing.
Right. Well, I had a few people say, you know, he would have, you know, musicians in the, you know, who really just felt strongly that he was just going to do jazz.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there was guys like him that were just their integrity was intact the whole way through.
Yeah.
Whether this is going to sell a lot of albums or not, whether this is going to get me booted off the label because I'm just not making you guys enough money. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm inspired by artistically. Yeah. Take it or leave it. And but there are I mean, the fame and the money can ruin creativity. You know, it can ruin the. You know, Neil Young is a great example of that. You know, I remember with the song. He made fun of the song. What the hell was
well, I was just going to say too, though, when you're talking about sort of money ruining creativity, I think, you know, a band that I know that you love, and I'm a little bit lukewarm on, is Kiss. And Kiss, I know that people said they were for the first, I don't know, 6-7 albums were pioneering rock and roll, and they were doing things the right way. And then the merchandise and the corporation, the business side of it, gradually overtook the artistic side. And I would say, and I've been talking about this obviously lots, we've been talking about Petty, is I always get the sense that never happened with him. And especially like I just finished up talking about the Echo album.
Never.
And there's a song on Echo called No More. Right. Where it's almost like he's singing about this as it's a line in the sand, not just in his personal life and sort of, you know, all the sort of hassle that he was having with his marriage falling apart and drugs and then how he's lived. So, and it's like that line in the sand, but it's also a creative line in the sand. It's like, look, I'm going to write these songs for me, and I'm going to trust that my audience will come along with me because they like me. But I'm not chasing the hit anymore. I'm not going to chase trends. I'm not going to, and he just kind of didn't do that. And then so his late career flourished. And he just kept being relevant and interesting, and, you know, and putting out quality music.
Yeah, Petty's very interesting. By the way, This Note's for You. That's the Neil Young song. You know that song? This Note's for You. So that's his taking his shot at the artists who are selling out. But yeah, Petty's interesting because this is the thing too. These artists, even the most legit artists like a Tom Petty, they wanted their songs on the radio. They wanted, I mean, there was no question, but how far would they go? How far are you going to go? Are you going to sell your soul to do that? Petty was not going to do that. So,
yeah.
But Petty had that pop sensibility about him. Like he knew, like we were talking when you were on my podcast, The Book That Rock, we're talking about Mike Campbell's book, right? And
yeah,
when Campbell writes Boys of Summer, Petty's just like, nah, not good for my album.
Yeah.
Our artist mind saying, just not going to fit in with my album. Didn't say he didn't like the song, had nothing to do with that. I'm sure he listened to it and said, damn, this is pretty cool shit. Just not working for me. And then it becomes a huge hit. And Petty's not stupid, and he says to Mike Campbell, he's like, damn, man, you really did it, right? And he was kind of like, gosh, shit, I probably should have taken that. Because there is that, when you're a musician, you want to attract the biggest audience you possibly can. Do you want people to love your work? I mean, that's it. You certainly do, but
of course.
But how far will you go? Are you gonna write it? So I mean, going back to Blues Traveler again, where Runaround was such a huge hit, and then John Popper's talking about how the label wanted him to write another Runaround, and he gave in. He goes, I admit, I gave him Most Precarious, which is on the follow-up album, and it sounds just like Runaround. He's like, here you go, take it, right? And can you criticize him for that? Look, I mean, these guys, to be in their shoes, I mean, they're also some of these artists too. It's not like they were so well off that they could just, tell any record label to go off. This is their life. Yeah. They got to make money. So
you got to play nice, especially at that stage of your career, right? You got to play nice with the label.
You are challenged with that, which is why, Grateful Dead, just the immense respect that I have for that band. Not just, I mean, I love their music, but God, they were making the album Oxo Moxoa, which is just bizarre. It's out there. And Warner Brothers was like,
we don't know what to do with this.
guys, we don't know what to do with this. And literally the band was like, okay, you could drop us if you want. And they weren't rich. I mean, they were probably living in the same apartment together, but they're just like, okay, take care.
See ya. Thanks. But it's the same thing.
They had the balls to do that, but
that's what Prince always pushed back as well, right?
Oh, Prince, yeah,
right. So Prince just said, "I'm out
example.
I'm taking ownership of everything I do. I'm kind of getting sick of you telling me that I've got to do this and I don't own that, and I'm working my butt off and I'm doing all the work and you're taking all the money." I don't think so. Right.
Oh, Prince is a great example. I got James Campion coming on. Just a great guy, friend of the podcast, super guy. He's got a book coming out. We're going to have him on in October on Prince and the Revolution, that era,
very cool.
Revolution era, right? Which basically bits and pieces of that band were collecting as time went on, but then they're officially on, I think the pre-Purple Rain album is when they're credited, 1999. But Prince was a guy. Did he want to be a pop star? Yeah. Did he want to write hit songs? Yeah. But he was never going to write a song that he didn't want to write.
Yeah.
He just had that brilliant mind of being able to write these songs that people loved. They were undeniable songs. But again, as an artist, he was not going to repeat that over and over and over again. Yeah. When he had that famous the electric drum sound on 1999, and then he did it again on Purple Rain. Yeah. But then that next album, Around the World in a Day, you got like Pop Life and Raspberry Beret. It's a totally different snare drum sound. He's done with that. We're moving on. Yeah. The label must have been like, hey, can you write us another Purple Rain? Yeah. No, that album sounds completely different. So, Springsteen is another one. Paul Rappaport was, he was the Columbia Records is Springsteen. And, he talked about how Springsteen, when he had Born to Run was a huge success. And then he was building back up again with The River, with Hungry Heart, again, pop songs that were pop friendly. They were perfect for pop radio, but Bruce is never going to write, intentionally uh, uh, something that he doesn't feel strongly about. But yeah, the river was starts to blow up, and he could have done Born in the USA right away, but he wasn't ready for it yet. He had to do Nebraska. He had to do that, just get a 4-track machine, go to some house in New Jersey. And he needed, because they started off as songs that were going to be with a band. So he had Born to Run in there. He had, I can't remember, maybe No Surrender. Some of the other songs were in there, and they were ready to polish them up and have this album be huge. And he's like, I'm not ready. As an artist, I am not ready. This is not what I want to do. And they're like, you're going to give us this, Nebraska? What is this? There was nothing. I mean, it was like just him and his guitar.
Yeah.
But again, the guts that he had to do that. Now he's ready. He's gotten that out of his system, and he's ready. Let's do the real Born in the USA. That thing blows up. Now, Dancing in the Dark, last song I think written for the album. And John Landau says, I think it was Landau that said, hey, I think we need something for the radio. Bruce says, okay, I think I got something that'll work. It wasn't like he was like, I got to come up with a hit. Yeah. But, there's that amazing combination of like these artists that can write a song that's hugely popular, that's perfect for radio, but they're not selling out. It's amazing to me that they do that.
Springsteen is a great example of that. And I actually just talked to, for one of my other podcasts, Peter Ames Carlin, who wrote The Name of This Band is REM, and also just wrote and released
I've had him on. Yeah.
Great guy, right?
Yes.
Great guy. And
yes, I'm hoping.
We were talking about that.
I would like to get him on. I don't know if I'm
Springsteen and Petty, right? Because Springsteen, well, Petty goes and reforms Mudcrutch. I mean, it's not commercial suicide, but it certainly isn't a move that you would sort of think, well, this is capitalizing on the success of this album. Let's go and double down. No, I'm going to reform this old band with my old mates and go on a much smaller venue tour. Springsteen, we just find out, in the last year or so, releases 7 unreleased full albums.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So clearly this is a guy who thinks, I've created this. Yeah, I'm not ready to release that. It's not exactly what I want to do right now, because the label would have said, yeah, sure, let's put it out. Perfect. So that integrity, I think, is why we love these guys, right?
But and just the unpredictability of the business too, and how things change so much. He came out with an album called Magic, which is, I mean, he had these songs on there that were he just was like, these are perfect for the radio. Let's see, what was it? Girls in Their Summer Clothes. Oh my God, these songs were perfect for radio. They just didn't take off. They didn't hit. But we're talking about, that would have been 2007, maybe. I'm trying to remember when that came out. But it just, radio was it didn't have that importance anymore. And heritage classic rock stations were ignoring those things. Okay. So they weren't even like bothering to play the singles off that album. And sure enough, the album did okay. I mean, it was like a solid, gold record, but not what he thought. So this is just unpredictable. So unpredictable. Absolutely. The business, and especially now, everything's splintered off into so many different areas where, like, you got social media where it's still, I mean, everybody's got it. Our attention spans are just getting shorter and shorter.
20 seconds, baby.
You got 20 seconds, the TikTok and Instagram and all this. I mean, the videos that get the most views on my YouTube channel are the 60-second shorts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I put it up, and like within a minute, there's like 1,000 hits. I put up like a full, fascinating, intriguing interview with somebody for an hour, and it's got like, 50 views, 100, maybe 200. Shit, man. But that's, I mean,
it's the nature of it, for sure.
It's nature of it. It's interesting. I get, and you probably get this too. You get more, I get more listens on the audio version than views on YouTube, because a podcast is like one of those things people, they don't want to sit there and watch as much as they're folding the laundry, they're doing this, they got it on in the background,
or exercising, or on the commute, absolutely.
But I still put them up on YouTube because I want to cover every possible avenue I can, not just to get the exposure for my show, but I want these authors to get the exposure they deserve. And they need that platform. And, then every now and then you get ones that do, like, I mean, shit, I have one, there was one I did on Prince, and it's, got like, I don't know, like 5,000 views. So you just,
You don't know though, right? You never know.
It's we're in this world where you don't know. You just
Yeah.
our episode did really well, by the way. The one where I had you
Well,
on to talk about Mike Campbell's book, um, but it's an unpredictable
yeah.
thing, and you just never know. That's why you just got to stay true to your art, and these artists have to do the same and just find a way to survive, make a living, and if they become big, rich, and famous, then they're great. But they don't get into it for that. They're just looking to somehow get through. That's what you got to find different ways. You got to
Yeah.
sell merchandise, do that. If you got, because if radio's not going to be there to help anymore, you gotta change with the business. I don't think radio is ever going to die. It's always going to be there, but it
Yeah.
just won't have that impact that it used to. And sadly, much of what you're hearing on the radio is pre-recorded. There's very few live. The morning shows are live, maybe
Yeah.
afternoon drive because you need traffic reports. But even that, you could, I mean, Christ, they're talking about AI. Just you could have AI created disc jockeys.
Yeah.
You know,
And we will. I mean,
I
100% will, right? I mean, for sure.
I'm listening to podcasts and watching videos on YouTube where the narration, I'm like, I can't tell. Is this an AI? I'm like, I think it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm not. I mean, it's literally that good.
The lines are getting blurred.
Which,
yeah. Well,
which is scary,
I think though too
How
that we
about
were
this? How
talking
about this, Kevin? How about this AI band
Oh,
that's getting all these plays on Spotify? What the hell was the name of this? Sundown or something? What?
Look, dude, I've said this.
That's scary.
I've been saying this for the last sort of 18 months or so, that I think within the next 5 years, an artist will appear who there'll be music videos, there'll be interviews, podcast interviews, there'll be all these types of things. There'll be quotes, there'll be artwork, and there'll be all the songs, and not a single bit of it will be real. It'll be all AI, all of it. Because if you think about how good sort of the AI, the imagery is now in the video kind of creation, if you give that 5 years to get better and better and better, because AI learns, it's not a straight line. It's like it's a curve, right? So it's going to get better faster. Within 5 years, I guarantee there'll be an artist that hits number one where no part of it's real, and no one will know
Oh God.
until someone exposes it. I guarantee it.
But at the end of the day, will the people still speak up and say enough is enough? Like we need human interaction. We cannot have, because I remember in the 90s when Amazon started and somebody telling me nobody's going to go out shopping anymore. Well, yeah, the number of people that you see at the mall is not what it was 30 years ago, but still people want to go out.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have some human interaction.
Absolutely. Which is why it's why I love jumping online. And we were talking about, well, where do you get your music from? And I don't listen to the radio because I don't want to be fed Back in Black 50 times a day. I don't want to hear it. I love Jump. I love Bohemian Rhapsody. I love Stay Out of Heaven, but I've heard them. I don't need to hear those all the time. So I get my music. I get my music from people I trust. And it's people like our friends, Corey and Mark over on the podcast Will Rock. It's people like Sean McGinnity and Tom McGinnity on their podcast. And it's people like you who talk to all these different authors and talk about different bands. And we've been on lots of different podcasts together. And I get, if you tell me that a band's good, I'm going to trust Eric Senich because I know he's got a good track record on it. So why don't we wrap up by telling people about Booked on Rock, where they can find it and who's coming up?
Yeah. I mean, if you love hearing about how a song was written, how a band was formed, you want to know about your favorite artists, the stuff that you don't see anywhere else, that you can only find in books, because these authors do the research and they talk to the people involved. They get inside of the story. That's what Booked on Rock is really all about. I mean, it's designed to give these authors who do such a phenomenal job writing these books a platform. It's also designed for people that love classic rock. You can be a lover of reading. You can be a lover of like the tagline is, for those about to read and rock, right? Hey, yeah. You may love to read and love rock and roll. Maybe you just love rock and roll. That's fine, because you're going to get all the stories in there. The hope is that maybe those people who aren't the avid readers, hey, maybe 1 out of every 10 will buy a copy.
Yeah.
But it's all there's so many stories and so many things that I continue to learn from these people that I speak with, that you just mentioned discovering new bands. Like I had the author recently of the 90s jam band scene, and this author turned me on to Mike Ayers is his name. He turned me on to this band Goose. He turned me on to this band Danger Muffin. He turned me on to the band Eggy. These jam bands that are phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's stuff that you will discover some new music here. But bottom line is you're gonna hear all the stories of classic rock. The list of people that I've had on is, I mean, it's mind blowing to me. Some of the best authors out there, but we've had people like the musicians themselves, or producers or engineers who've written books. I've had them on. I've had Tom Werman, producer for famous Cheap Trick, and producer of so many bands, Motley Crue. Rick Emmett from Triumph has been on. Billy Joel's drummer Liberty DeVito's been on. Great Weiss guitarist Mark Kendall's been on. Engineer Bill Snay, that guy worked with everybody. I mean, we're talking Steely Dan, Pink Floyd, you name it. Leonard Skinner manager Alan Walden. Chris Epting, I'll give you, and Peter Ames Carlin I had on for his REM book. Our friend Greg Renoff, the phenomenal Van Halen historian. Greg Prado, a great friend now, he's written so many great books. Martin Popoff, but Chris Epting I just had on. I'm not sure when this episode is going to run, but the episode's up. Chris Epting is a guy who's co-written memoirs with John Oates, with Phil Collin of Def Leppard. I'm thinking of all the ones but most importantly, he is currently working on the memoir of Paul Rogers. He is working with Paul Rogers himself to write a memoir. Paul Rogers, Bad Company, The Firm, cool. Free, you name it. And so Chris was on recently, and I'm looking forward to having him back on, and fingers crossed, maybe Paul Rogers will join and come on when that book comes out. So again, if you love rock and roll and you love the stories, you will get the stories here. I mean, plenty of them. And I even put up highlights from these episodes just because there's so much in these. I just put up a Hall & Oates story that Chris told about how, an eviction led to John Oates moving in with Daryl Hall, because John Oates was living, I think, with Daryl Hall's sister, and then the sister didn't pay the rent. And so John Oates is like, "Hey, dude, your sister's not paying the rent." And Daryl's like, "Yeah, well, just stay with me." And they start writing music together. Those types of stories. Had an episode about Megadeth. Just so many things. So you can go to bookdownrock.com to find out it's on Spotify, YouTube, but you name it. And we've had my friend Kevin Brown on twice. Is it a couple more times? Yeah. We talked Petty, and then we talked about Mike Campbell's amazing book.
Yeah.
So look for those episodes as well. And again, thanks so much for having me on, Kevin. This is, you do an amazing job. I think Tom Petty's family should be contacting you and say, thank you. They've got many more to go, right? Don't you? You still have
we've got
like 2-3 more albums. The
Wilburys, four albums, Petty and the Heartbreakers, 2 Mudcrutch albums, 2 Wilburys albums. And then we've got Playback, An American Treasure, all the B-sides, all the stuff that's been released since. And then we can get into Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs and the Blue Stingrays, and we can get into Ben Monster. I got years to go with this stuff, dude.
You got to just keep yourself in good health so you can stick around for a long time. I can't wait for Mojo. I loved Mojo, because you haven't got that. Is that coming up? No, that's still not for a little while.
2 albums. So you've got Last DJ, then Highway Companion, then Mojo, which I'm looking forward to too, because that was a revelation when we log off, when we sign off here, and we'll sign off here quickly. I'll show you the artwork concept that I've got coming up for Mojo, so I think you'll like it. So
cool.
All right, well, dude, this has been, as it always is, an absolute blast. Thank you so much. Everyone, go check out Booked on Rock, and go follow Eric on social media. He's a good dude, one of life's good ones. So thanks so much, Eric.
Kevin, thanks, man. Thank you. Take care.
It was a night like any other night. All the stars were burning bright. I had got my homework done, so I turned my radio on. But the music wouldn't play, and I heard some newsman say, in a distant Texas town, the sun was high, but bullets rained down. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Well, sad music played for 3 long days, and all the flags were only halfway raised, and wreaths of black hung everywhere, till a bugle played that final air. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Yeah, turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Well, November passed on by, along with all those tears we cried. And on Friday nights, once again, you know, I turned my radio on. But the music began to change, rock and roll getting rearranged by those mop-top British boys. My older brother, the greaser, called it noise. Turn your radio on. 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 Yeah, turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. Turn your radio on. It was a night like any other night. All the stars were burning bright. I had got my homework done, so I turned my radio